Let's talk about mental health in cybersecurity. And by that, I mean your mental health, right? There are a lot of things about the technology business that can be hard on one's mental health. It is a stressful, sometimes, job. There are a lot of demands, requirements. Sometimes, there are deadlines, things get broken, systems go down, intrusions might happen. There's office politics. There are all kinds of things. Some of these things you could do something about, some of them you can't. Some of these things might just be the product of an unhealthy work environment that you need to move on from. If we look at, again, going back to Reddit, r/sysadmin, as you browse through here, you'll find, and I don't have any particular examples. Oh, wow. Good timing. I totally didn't plan that. I wasn't expecting to find something. This guy says the stress is really getting to me, right? These are the kind of posts I'm talking about. It just happens so common. I just didn't think there'd be one so close to the top, but happens a lot. There's always people talking about stress, people talking about some corruption, some sort of problem, and it really gets to them. So it would be good to read through here and look at some of these kinds of things. Now, I have no idea what this guy's issue is. CEO left under interesting circumstances. They've got seemingly an incompetent IT department director. Exec said turn off. Here's another post. Exec said turn off all other backup internet connections. Office politics, but yeah, there's always stuff in here related to mental health, particularly stress. I would recommend reading through here, looking at some of these kind of posts, looking at some of the kind of advice people are given, and learning from it. Now, I'm no psychologist or psychiatrist or anything. I really don't have the tools to recommend solutions other than to tell you to take care of yourself first. The company is not nearly as important as you are. You are number one. You should not be sacrificing your health, physical or mental, for your job. That's all I've got to say about that, really. But I want to point out a few other things. So stress is a big one. Be aware of it. Find some way to deal with it. Find some way to avoid it. Find a better working condition to stay away from it. That's a big thing. There is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. This can happen a lot also. And this is, if you're not familiar with it, here's the wiki page. It says the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias whereby people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. Okay, so it happens often that people get into IT, they get into cybersecurity, they learn how to do a few things, they learn how to do a little programming, maybe they learn how to exploit a couple things, they learn how to play with Kali Linux a little bit. Suddenly they think they're super uber elite hacksaws, right? And they're thinking they're really great and they can break into anything, or they can secure anything, or they can build an impenetrable system or whatever. Well, they are at this part of the curve, right? This is a famous graph. Confidence versus competence. When you're first starting out, you really know next to nothing, but you get a little bit of knowledge. Now you think you're hot stuff. You know enough to be dangerous, right? And then your confidence is way up because you don't know what you don't know. And that is a big problem. But then eventually something happens to knock you down a peg or two or 20. And then you realize, oh my God, this is such a huge field. There is so much to know that then you kind of lose confidence for a while. But time passes, you learn, by experience, more and more and more and more, you get better. You become more wise. This they call it the slope of enlightenment here. Your actual real competence increases, and then it kind of flattens off up here. They have it labeled here, plateau of sustainability, right? Now you can be confident, but you've got the competence to back up that confidence. So that's something to be aware of. When you're getting started, don't get too full of yourself. Don't get too arrogant, especially when you go to job interviews. You want to show off what you really know, but you don't want to be arrogant, and you don't want to get into areas where it's obvious you're just talking BS. So be aware of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, there's something which is kind of the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. That is the imposter syndrome. This happens a lot also. People generally don't talk about their Dunning-Kruger effect because it's kind of embarrassing, right? People get humbled, but they don't go and post on Reddit about, oh my gosh, I was so stupid today. I thought I really knew this. And then some guy who knows 10 times as much about it as I do comes along and shows that I'm an idiot and I don't know nearly as much as I think I do. No, that never happens. What does happen is people will post about imposter syndrome. So here it says, imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Right? So what this means is you do some study, you put together a resume, you do some networking, and maybe you get a job. But now you arrive at this job and you feel kind of overwhelmed. You feel like I'm in way over my head. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't really deserve to be here. Somehow I lucked into it, or I fooled them, or I tricked them, or something. And they just feel like a fraud. They feel like a failure. They feel like they're going to fail. It says they may think they are deceiving others because they feel they are not as intelligent as they outwardly portray themselves to be. There's a lot of imposter syndrome in this field, especially from people just getting started. And again, I'm no psychiatrist or therapist. I think the best thing you can do is to read through here, be familiar with it, and it may suggest some treatments or some ways around it, but I find just being aware of these things can help a lot. So we've looked at stress, we've looked at Dunning-Kruger, we've looked at imposter syndrome. Let's talk about another stress-related aspect of being in this business, and that is of being on call. I spent an awful lot of time, especially in the first half of my career, being on call as a system administrator, or even as the system administrator / security guy, as I eventually became. Whenever anything broke, whenever anything went down, a server crashed, a switch failed, the network went down, whatever, people would be calling me, or more often the monitoring systems I had set up would be paging me, sending me text messages. And in hindsight, I made some mistakes. I should never have allowed myself to become, for example, the only person on call for a small company. When you're the only system administrator or the only security guy for a small company, that kind of becomes inevitable. But I'm going to tell you, avoid it. In fact, avoid on call if at all possible. Because you're going to be getting text messages, depending on the environment, you're going to be getting pings of some sort, possibly 24 hours a day. I cannot count the number of times in the first half of my career that I was awakened in the middle of the night. Sometimes I actually had to drive down to the data center to fix something. Oftentimes I could do it from just online, but the constant pages, especially in a big network, that you'll be getting is problematic. It's very stressful. It'll take a toll on your mental and physical health. Oh, but it's just an IT job. They're just pages, right? But you're still under stress, and it still takes a toll. It can even give you a sort of almost like a PTSD type situation. Now, this is more of a problem in the sysadmin, DevOps, SRE field where you're getting those kind of pages, but it can happen in security also. So, if at all possible, I strongly recommend avoiding on call. Now, if you're on call for a stable network that doesn't generate many pages and you've got other people to share the on call duties with you, there's a rotation such that you're not always on call, well, that's a lot better. But I still recommend avoiding it if at all possible. And when you go to interview, depending on what kind of position it is, you might want to ask, is there any sort of, on-call rotation required of this job? Are you going to be on call at all? And if the answer is yes, well, that's definitely something you want to know about it before you move into the position. And I consider that a strike against any position, really. As I said, I spent a lot of time on call, a lot more time than I should have. It was not good for me. I regret it. And from now on, I am avoiding being on call like crazy. I don't want to be on call. Now, if somebody has a problem and they call me for my help, even if it's after hours, depending on the job, I'm probably okay with that. I'm willing to be a team player and help people out. But if I'm going to be getting just tons of automated text messages all the time, anytime something glitches in the network somewhere, that's not cool. Nowadays, if I'm going to be on call, I want it to be another human being who is calling me, and I want it to not happen more than once or twice a year, really, at most. Any on-call situations that are going to require more than that from me in terms of stress and after-hours performance, I really don't want anything to do with, not anymore. And I recommend you don't either. Now, if they're paying you enough, well, it all depends. What is your physical and mental health worth, right? As far as money goes. And again, in my opinion, if you're going to be the only person on call in an unstable network and there's nobody else going on the on-call rotation with you and you're going to be getting pages all the time, no amount of money is worth that. If it's a stable network and you're in an on-call rotation with a bunch of other people so that you only actually go on call once every month or two, that's possibly tolerable with the right compensation, I would say. But the ideal is to really not be on call at all because it can be very stressful. So that's it. That's it for mental health as far as this career goes. Security, cybersecurity, and IT sysadmin, they're all kind of the same as far as this goes. Watch out for stress, avoid on-call, be aware of Dunning-Kruger, be aware of imposter syndrome.